had a lovely steak, had some sparkling water, and then we sat down for the movie. And within 5 or 10 minutes of the opening credits starting, I started getting chest pains, and chest pains that were not going away.
Mick, how did you find Carnivore?
Dave, I was going through what most people would experience as they're getting into their 50s, and started to feel some health issues, not feeling my greatest, and went and saw the doctor to get some tests done. And, bit overweight, probably running around the 70 odd kilo mark, um, cholesterol a bit high, all the usual markers. And I thought I can fix this. I'll go back and do a bit of fasting and stuff that I've done in the past. That led me down a path to learn about keto, and I did keto for probably 8 or 9 months. And as I had dropped down to 57, 58 kilos from
And how tall are you?
167, so what's that, 5'6", 5'7". Um, it was about 12% body fat at that stage. Um, anyway, as I was going through that journey, I came across videos of Paul Mason talking about Carnivore and a few others, and thought, these guys are nuts. What are they doing, right? And anyway, the more I dug into it and observed, um, I thought I'd be interested to see more about this. And I approached my GP and said, I want to go down the Carnivore path. And I brought him into the discussion right at the beginning when I changed changed my way of eating, and looked to him. I should go back. I looked to him. He'd not been my GP before. I didn't actually have a dedicated one, and I went and saw him. I said, I'm going down a journey, and I want someone there who's got my back and just help me on that journey rather than prescribe meds. I just need to get the support. And he was all good with that. So when I went to see him about going down the Carnivore path, he said, give me a few days, I'll come back to you with anything I can find about what you might want to test for in advance. He rang me a few days later and said, I can't find anything that's negative about it. There's only a few videos online, and I can put you in touch with a dietitian. I thought, well, yeah, I don't really want to talk to a dietitian because we know the story there. So that started me on my journey, Dave. I started Carnivore there, fairly clean. I would still have some low carb beers and so on, not very often, but occasionally. Work. I was travelling a lot for work, and that social side of things kept presenting a little bit here and there. So we'd go out and have a steak for dinner, but you'd have a low carb beer with the office staff. So that was back in 2021, middle of 21, that I actually went carnivore. The journey was initially about health and feeling better again, and I didn't understand what was in front of me, or what good felt like, because it was just that journey that everyone's on. After I'd lost a whole heap of weight and improved a number of facets and went down the Carnivore path, things got better. Interestingly enough, I actually put on weight when I went Carnivore, and went from 57 to about 62 kilo and filled out much better. So I'd obviously gone too far with weight loss um, previously. And what I found was that, as much as I was doing intermittent fasting previously, and I could go most of the day on one meal and the like, with Carnivore, it got even easier to do that. And it just became the norm, just eating once a day. I still had coffee with cream, and just usually a steak or a steak and eggs, and something simple like that. I was working away, probably flying every other week for a year and a half, 2 years at that stage. So that sort of came to a bit of an end, middle of 23, and through that whole period, I was I'm an engineer background, engineering management's my field of expertise. So getting into analysis and data is actually quite interesting and enjoyable to know what's going on. So in partnership with my GP, I would get various labs done every 3 to 6 months just to keep an eye on things, where we're at, look for things. And I must admit, at the time, I probably didn't know what to look for. You're just doing the usual labs and keeping an eye on things. As I learned a bit more, started looking for the inflammation markers and various factors of things. I suffered with psoriasis from about the age of 13, and I found that when I didn't stray, I would clear that up after 40 plus years of suffering with it. So um, the little improvements that go along, and then the weight loss just became a byproduct. It wasn't actually really the objective, and it just happened and felt great. Um, that sort of takes me a bit of fast forward um, to I was doing some blood tests and whatever else in 23, about April 23. Everything was going great, and I chose to do a whole heap of tests. And I thought I'll do a CAC. I was 53, I think, at the time. And anyway, everything came back fantastic except that CAC. For my age, it basically put me in the top 5% of the population with atherosclerosis. So, bit of a shock to the system. Like everyone else, you think you're doing well, everything's feeling great, and you're expecting a zero score just because you're on carnivore. You shouldn't have atherosclerosis. But that wasn't the case. And in talking to both my GP and then ultimately a cardiologist, they made it clear it's not the last 2 or 3 years of what you've done, it's the last 2 or 3 decades. So I suppose a bit of a message there. This takes time to come on, and it takes time to manage, and there's ways to manage it. And I didn't have any symptoms that suggested I even had it. So if it wasn't for the fact that I did that random test, then I would not have known to this day. Okay, so that was probably the journey to and into carnivore, and then obviously beyond that, I get into a whole heap more rabbit holes and weeds uh, since that day.
So what was the score that it came back with?
So my score was 322, and that puts me at 95% of my age group. So there's only 5% of people in the age group that are actually got a higher score than that, which is not very comforting, right? When you're feeling the best you have since you've been a teenager.
So did that make you kind of? I mean, I know the cardiologist and the GP said, well, it's 20, 30 years of stuff that build up to this. But did you kind of feel wary about what you were doing as far as carnivore at that time when you heard that number?
Absolutely, absolutely, and in part, you start to second guess everything you're doing. When you're educated all your life that this is what does it, I didn't think I had been relatively unhealthy through my life. I did martial arts for many years, and I didn't play a lot of sport, but that was my sport, if you like. Um, reasonably well. Occasionally, you would go off and the like, not thinking about fat being a good thing. It was, you're still having a bit of carbs, but not being over the top. But at the end of the day, when you're being educated and changing your approach, and then you get this result, you start to really second guess what you've done, and you think, "Wow, is this it? Am I doomed based on what the results were saying?" And I should say, it wasn't just a score, because the place that I get the scans done, I actually get a copy of the scans. So I get the CT scans as well, and I've got access to them as I go forward, so I can go back and compare. That then said, okay, find a cardiologist, and I couldn't find a carnivore cardiologist, but I did find one who supports low carb, probably more pescatarian Mediterranean approach, but and bordering on vegan. But notwithstanding that, put everything on the table and said, "This is where we're at. This is what I want to do." And we did a stress echo. We did ApoA, LP little a, ApoB, and then we did a CT CA, CT cardioangiogram with the dye, and that just reinforced, yes, based on that analysis, the score was 309, close enough to within the same number, and it was somewhere between a 60 and 70% blockage in the LAD. As most people may be aware, that's the Widowmaker one that does catch you out pretty quickly.
And you'd had no symptoms up to this point?
Still no symptoms, and to this day, no symptoms.
Wow.
I'll say that. But so yeah, it's the stress echo was fine. So much so I'm actually due for one this coming Friday for a follow up. But the stress echo was fine, and he did the CTCA, and we were scheduled to. That was June. We were scheduled to meet up again a couple of months later. It was like an 8-week cycle. This is where a couple of weeks after that scan was done, I had a bit of a finish up in the work I was doing interstate in Brisbane, and on the way back, I'd got into a probably poor habit of, while we were waiting in the airline lounge, you have a glass of wine or two. On the plane, you have another one or two, and didn't think much of it at the time. The Saturday, my wife and I had gone out for dinner, and then we were going to go and watch a movie. And long story short, had a lovely steak, had some sparkling water, and then we sat down for the movie. And within 5 or 10 minutes of the opening credits starting, I started getting chest pains, and chest pains that were not going away. I mentioned to my wife, she just said, "Forget the movie, we're going straight to the hospital," which we did. That's where it really hit home that this could be time's up, and if that doesn't shake the proverbial out of you, then nothing will, right? It really does. Anyway, did the troponin tests. Um, they were fantastic in the hospital, just calming me down, and just being in the hospital is the best place you can be for something like that. The test came back negative. It wasn't a heart event. What it did end up being on subsequent investigation was H. pylori, and a bacteria that 50% of the population will have. Generally, you can live with it, but a combination of the sparkling water and probably a bit of indigestion, it just flared it up. So that was what created the pain, and it felt just very much like a heart attack. The, they'd contacted the cardiologist from the hospital. He was comfortable that if troponin was negative, go home, do your thing. And he called me the following week just to touch base. So it was sent me down again a bit more rabbit holes and investigation further, looking at what markers do I need to now start monitoring, and that was a bit of a step change in the approach. Reading as much as I can, investigating different facets of this, what's working, what's not. Malcolm Kendrick's books, Patrick Toit's website, Linus Pauling, Thomas Levi, Nathan Bryant, exploring everything from how the repair mechanisms work in the arteries and what actually happens, the role of macrophages, the role of LDL and K2, and what the mechanisms are. We see a lot of it, and everyone says, don't worry about LDL. It's not one to look at. There's more to it than just simply it's not the one to look at, because it is a transport vehicle. It takes K2 around, it takes D3 around it. It actually serves a purpose. But we shouldn't ignore it when it's high. We need to do more homework. But exploring everything that these people were proposing and following it up with the science that's there and some papers and so on, it really helped better educate me on what's going on and where I need to focus on. and I'll put this out there, it's not a one size fits all. It's very much a root cause approach to look at what each individual has going on and what they need to attend to. So I think a key point at that point for me was to have an open mind. We don't know what we don't know as we're on our journey, so we have to have a bit of an open mind and be open to a bit of an alternate view. Maybe we are doing something wrong, and if you're not open to that, then you're not going to improve. Um, you hear it often. I'm on a carnivore diet. I don't have to worry about anything. Well, unfortunately, you still do, because it's great. It's very supportive, but it's not the be all end all. You may have already got other damage that you need to fix. Um, Linus Pauling, I'm not sure if you're very familiar with him, Dave, but Linus Pauling patented vitamin C as a remedy for atherosclerosis. Thomas Levi's books talk heavily about that, um, using proline and lysine, which we get out of meat, interestingly enough, so you don't have to supplement with them. But so as long as you're eating enough meat, you get plenty out of there. K2 from your food, but it's never enough in the food for what the body needs it for. So on its own, if you didn't have a problem, that'd be fine. But if you've got a deficiency, then you need to fix things and support it with a bit of a high dose. One of the areas that I sort of further tested was even getting into MTHFR, and I was having trouble getting homocysteine down and folate up. And low folate is very common on a carnivore diet. I was one of the people say, "Oh no, that's not real." Um, Dr. Suresh was actually digging through that, and he actually said, "Yeah, get it checked out." And lo and behold, the MTHFR gene is I've got one of them going on. So then supplementing with L5 MTHF or folate helped fix that, and that's on the improve. I suppose, and it's just been a bit of an ongoing journey. It's not about a one shot fix, and you constantly, how are we feeling, what's going on. I suppose just to pick up the thread there about uh, protocols and with my engineering mindset, before you change something, you want to put a benchmark in. So I was changing my protocol a little bit. I was already having nattokinase and a few other things to go with it, berberine and D3 and K2. I wanted to go to a high dose K2 as per what Patrick Toit talks about in his stuff. So in December 23, I've been 8 months since the first test. I actually got another scan done, noting that the doctor was going to be a bit cynical and say the test isn't that accurate. It's a crude measure at best, but we do know that statistically the numbers increased 25% year on year if left untreated. So that should have meant that my numbers should have gone up. And I did that before doing a change in protocols. That was in 23. And I've recently, in December 24, I've just done another um, test to see if those protocols are having an effect, I suppose. And to cut to the chase there, that first set of results that were 8 months on, CAC score had gone up to 342 or 342, but my volume had decreased. So the CAC had gone up, but we know the CAC is actually a calculation of density or brightness of the light, if you like, when they do the scan, times the volume. And the interesting thing is that my volume had actually decreased. So the volume was, I think, 269, and it had dropped to 246 cubic millimeters, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it should have gone up based on the statistics. Right? So we're doing something right in the right direction. And the score going up is because the density is increasing while the plaque gets harder and gets more stabilized. So you would expect the score to go up. So that was a step in the right direction, even though the score had gone up, the volume was coming down. Fast forward 12 months, and the main difference I had done is I had added a higher dose of K2 at this stage to what I was already doing. Fast forward 12 months to December 24, and my score had gone from 342 down to 268 or 269, somewhere around there. And my volume had decreased from 246 down to 199 cubic millimeters, and my mass as well had decreased from 58 milligrams down to, I think, 47 milligrams. I saw in 12 months a reduction of 20 or 19 to 20% across all three figures. This is in the face of your score always goes up or at best stabilizes to neutral. Going backwards is not
So
something that you
this indicates some kind of regression.
absolutely. And to qualify that, I used exactly the same machine at exactly the same scanning radiologist. So whether there's a bit of error allowed in that, it's been indicated that you might have a 3% repeatability error. We're still well beyond any of that repeatability error that you might get. If the scan wasn't super clear because of heart rate and so on, it would still show the majority of the volume still there or bigger. Right? So the fact that we've gone backwards in the face of everything goes up, we're on a path and continue to unpack the journey. So I suppose that the key point there is it's not all doom and gloom. You've got to take a breath and educate yourself as best you can. This is the individual's battle. No one's going to fix it for you. You've got to do it yourself. But there's plenty out there that supports and provides that information. I did, when
And
I
I
got
think
my results back.
one of the key things you mentioned is that it's really, it's down to the individual, right? It's like everyone's going to have a different starting point when whatever diet they're doing. Everyone's starting from a different point, right? And so if you discover that you've got atherosclerosis, it's a matter of working out why and how, maybe what the deficiencies are.
Exactly right, Dave. It's not a one size fits all, and the solution for my challenges will be different based on the insults that I've got to my arteries and the causes. My psoriasis is a trigger for atherosclerosis. Leaky gut. Many factors come into play here. It's not just smoking. I don't smoke. Alcohol could have contributed to it. Carbs could have contributed to it. Many factors could have contributed to it. But stress, insufficient sunlight, uh, overloading yourself, not taking time to enjoy and laugh and socialize, all of those things are stresses that create problems in your arteries. Malcolm Kendrick does a much better job, and so does Patrick Toit in their literature about the various aspects that might create this. And I really encourage people to read The Clot Thickens first and foremost, and get onto um, Concentrated K website, which is Patrick's website there for the vitamin K he sells. He sells it essentially at cost, but more importantly, he's got the references and the science behind why K is so important. And when I say K, that's K2. Even if you don't buy his product, go there, read the information. He actually had done something like 15,000 hours or 16,000 hours of literature investigation. He's an engineer. He's a process engineer. He's been dealing with his story, and it's all over YouTube, so people can look at that and listen. He's been dealing with it for 20 years, and he reversed his. He actually reversed it twice because he had a bit of an event that brought something back. But he's documented that and shares in various interviews his results. But on his website, he actually then goes into the studies and why vitamin K is so important on many aspects, not just one purpose. It covers so many different things. Um, the other one I haven't mentioned, but is oral hygiene. Um, Root canals are one of your biggest nemesis in heart health. It provides a direct pathway for the bacteria to get into your bloodstream because you'll never get rid of the bacteria when they do root canals. It's actually Thomas Levi talks about that. Uh, uh, Will Davis talks about it. It's talked about in quite a few different circles that root canals are actually one of the major causes. So if people have got them, they might want to revisit what they do with them, and it's recommended to pull them out. So that's how extreme it is. Um, but it's all those little things, Dave. So that's the key point, I suppose. I don't have any root canals. I actually got my first filling last year, which I'm pretty irritated at. At the age of 54, you get a filling. And I let the doc talk me into it, the dentist talked me into it, and in hindsight, probably should have held out a bit. Notwithstanding that, it's making sure that you're open-minded enough to get to the bottom of your causes and not just assume because you're taking a supplement, that's all you have to worry about. And the supplements that I'm on may not be the right ones for the next person. There are a few common ones, and most people are aware of magnesium and D3 and K2 and so on. But there's a few others along the way that are worthy of exploring on a case by case basis.
Probably for most people, it's nothing to do with the statin deficiency, I would imagine. So.
I did have that debate with my doctor. He was worried, and he wanted to put me on a very small dose. He said 5 milligrams, and I said I don't want it. And that was after the first visit. And he said it's just precautionary. It just helps stabilise what's there. He did say they probably get a bit of a bad rap. He knows this message that's in the low carb circles. Notwithstanding, I said if I take that, then you'll tell me not to try the other alternatives that I want to explore, the more supplement based. Um, he was open minded enough to say, well, okay, if you want to try that, but the tests aren't there to back it up, and so on, and so there's not clinical trials to do it. There are some papers out that do support the likes of berberine reducing atherosclerosis and nattokinase doing that as well. Interestingly, there's a paper out that shows nattokinase helps deal with the spike protein. For those that might be interested in that as well, it's always interesting, especially given the heart health issue. One of the things that these supplements do is help reduce your fibrinogen, which is the clotting factor. And interestingly enough, after I had my hospital event, I agreed to take the aspirin that the cardiologist wanted me to take till we met again. But even just taking aspirin, I don't take meds. That aspirin did not agree with me. It was causing me discomfort and the like. And after I had seen him then as the follow up, I said, right, I'm going off the aspirin. This is what I'm going to be doing. And that's my body. I need to give it what I think is going to work. And if I'm wrong, then I'm the one taking that risk. And when we sat down last year after my results had come through from December 23, he acknowledged that, look, it didn't go in the wrong direction, and okay, keep doing what we're doing and keep an eye on things. If things go awry, we might need to change, but give it a run its course a little bit and see where we're at.
So was that
Well,
after the December 24 or December 23?
that was after the December 23. So I went. My next appointment with him was June 24. Um, so I'd had the results, but we hadn't had a chance to catch up. And when I shared them with him, he sort of agreed. Said, yes, the accuracy is not necessarily there on a CAC, but yes, you're right. It didn't go higher. It actually, um, from a volume perspective, even if they got the volume figure wrong, it didn't increase. It actually did decrease. It dropped in that 8 months about 8%, 7 or 8%. So it was a nominal 10% over the annualized period, which was really good. When I spoke to Patrick earlier this year, I stayed in touch with him because he is approachable, very very lovely guy. Um, I tic tac with him once I got my results. I said I'd follow up, and he indicated that typically, and he said it in his videos, typically you'll expect a reduction of around 10% per annum, which is a really good result, obviously, in the scale of what we see out there. But if you can hit all the key issues and give the body the sufficient nutrients and ingredients to allow it to recover and heal itself, then you can go at the pointy end of that and improve it, which I'd like to think where I'm at is in the right front end of the upper thresholds. One of the gentlemen I'd come across on YouTube, not talking, but one of the commentators, he'd given me a few morsels of exploration and the Thomas Levi and Linus Pauling approach. And I came across him again in a separate thread a couple of weeks ago, and we were sharing notes, and he had dropped in 18 months 30%. 20 months, sorry. In 20 months, he had dropped his 30%. So it's not a lone wolf scenario. It is doable. He's using a very similar protocol.
Mm.
So
So this is really good to hear. I mean, for anyone listening to this, this is really good to hear because this can strike anyone, right? But
absolutely.
when you actually talk about it, it makes sense because your body can heal everything else. Why wouldn't it be able to heal this if you give it the right things?
Absolutely.
There's money to be made in thinking that you can't heal it, right? Same with diabetes.
Well, I'll put it this way. Look, we know that the pharmaceutical companies have no interest in fixing it. It doesn't give them any benefit. So who would do a study to show that you can fix it properly? Now, Linus Pauling, he took out a patent on vitamin C as, or a protocol, I should say, broader than just vitamin C, a protocol to reverse atherosclerosis. And he did not put a dollar on it. He actually made it freely available to stop pharmaceuticals getting hold of it and charging people to heal their ailments. And a lot of people have healed themselves in this. If and it's about giving your body the right nutrients to restore collagen synthesis, to
Right.
create.
So from memory, I remember reading something about this as part of another article, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was you. I think one of the things that he found was you're lacking in vitamin C if you've got a high LPA, and the LPA is what's making up for the lack of vitamin C, or something like that.
Pretty much. It's funny you say that because I came across that particular piece of information again a few days ago when I was looking at some stuff. I thought, oh, that's right. That it becomes the surrogate marker. So, um, and high dose vitamin C. We're not talking about 500 milligrams. I'll take 6 to 8 grams a day, spread out through the day. Um, I know there's a whole theory there on oxalates and whether vitamin C gives you kidney stones. I recently had tests done on my kidneys for other reasons, and ultrasounds and so on, and nothing to be seen. Okay, and I've been doing this for a year and a half with high dose vitamin C pretty much daily. So there's a few other things that come to play in terms of vitamin C is one of the enablers for collagen formation. But you need proline, you need lysine, and we get that through our meat. Now, um, Dr. Chafee talks about an alternate mechanism that the body's got to not require vitamin C. He was talking about a mechanism that we don't necessarily need vitamin C when we've got sufficient intake of um, the downstream product of what forms the collagen instead of vitamin C. And I haven't got it on top of the head, but essentially because we have our sinews and we have a lot of the fatty connective tissue, that sort of bypasses some of that requirement for vitamin C, hence why we don't get scurvy. And it's not necessarily the small dose of vitamin C, it's the body's got what it needs anyway because of other things that we're eating. So if I don't get part A, my plan B, C, D, the body has many mechanisms to put in surrogate solutions. So it's all of that and giving the body the right building blocks. We've got such a clever piece of machinery that we carry around with us. But going back to your point earlier, the body can heal everything itself. We've heard of cirrhosis of the liver being reversed. If it's not too scarred, you can reverse that. Kidney disease being reversed. Scabs we know happen. It's part of the healing process. We have a scab, it fixes itself. Off we go. Why not your arteries? Why not? Now, some would be concerned about flaking off plaque. I don't believe it flakes off in that method. I think it's slowly removed and taken away, unless I fall over while we're having this discussion, and then maybe that'll prove me wrong. But it's a over time reduction. It takes years to improve. It's not something you're going to do overnight, and you won't necessarily see improvement in the first 6 months or the first 12 months, although people have. In some people, the carnivore approach on its own may be sufficient, but in others, maybe not.
Yeah. So just to pick up on that flaking off of thing that you mentioned, the just being cynical about it, the one party that benefits from the flaking off idea is the pharmaceutical industry, right? Because they want to give you something to stabilize it.
Yep, exactly right. And you know what that one thing is, and I'll say put a statin in because at least it's doing the right thing. It's doing exactly what the body is designed to do if you've got a problem. And this was my debate early days with my doctor. My body is designed to stabilize damaged arteries, and that's what the plaque process is. We panic about that process, but we want to give people a statin to help stabilize it, and then it's okay if a statin's doing it, not if your body's doing it. There's a fair position there on, well, one's maybe a little bit more controlled than the other, but I think I prefer not to take those medications if I can. The body is a pretty clever beast. I don't think we're smarter than the body, put it that way.
So I've thought of I've had this idea about something for a long time, right? There's a lot of people that are very involved in this kind of thing now, like that have a technical background, somewhat technical background. Yourself, you're an engineer. You look at Ivor Cummins, he's an engineer. You look at Dave Feldman, he's an engineer. All these people, I've been in software development. I'm used to like looking for a root cause problem and all this kind of thing, right? It feels like this is actually an area, health is actually an area that's very interesting for people with a technical background because they can look at it and go, hang on, all this stuff that big pharma is saying and doctors are saying, doesn't really make sense because, like, why would this be healing but this isn't? Why would the body be poisoning itself in this way with these things and not in others? It doesn't make sense.
Exactly, exactly. And this is,
Mm.
as more and more citizen scientists, I think Dave Goldman refers to, uh, as more and more people who aren't locked into, I don't like the phrase, but the dogma of medicines and pharmaceuticals. They're looking for the answers rather than what's the solution. There's a subtle difference in those two words. What's the answer of what's causing the problem rather than what's how do I fix it? That comes later. If I know what the cause is, as you say with root cause approach, don't try to fix it till you understand the problem. Even where my thinking's at the moment, and I know we talk about inflammation being the cause. It's not inflammation that's the cause, in my view. Inflammation is part of the healing process. It's what the body does to fix an insult, to use one of the quoted terms, an insult to arteries or whatever. Chronic inflammation, repeated inflammation, becomes problematic in itself. But having, if we damage a knee or whatever else, the body inflames around that to stabilize it and let it do some healing. What caused the need to inflame is what we've got to get to the root cause of. So in every time we've got inflammation, it's what caused the inflammation, because the inflammation is just a marker. It's actually a healing process. So having anti-inflammatories when you've got inflammation is detrimental. Anyone who's been
Right.
on them long enough knows the consequence. So
Yeah.
it's let the heal, but don't let it get damaged before needing to. Don't let it need to be healed. Is really the goal, right? You want to be at a point where you
Yeah.
don't get damaged, so you the healing.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned, in technical areas, you don't just like go, oh, that's the problem. Let's just fix that at surface level, right? You have to work out what the root cause is. And when we're when we're pushing out a change, right? And you might notice there's a problem, and yeah, you have to go back and find out what the root cause is. You might solve something in the interim. You might like do a quick fix, but that's called a patch. In other words, a band-aid, until you can actually go back and work out what the root cause is, right? You don't put the band-aid on and then go, okay, well now I can forget about it.
It's back filler, right? The old just plaster up the wall over and over again. How many band-aids do you put on top of each other? And that's essentially what medicines are doing, right? They're just covering up
Yeah.
the problem, and then something else comes along, and you have to fix that as well. So it's if people can take away one thing out of this discussion is understand root cause and how it applies to you, rather than just doing what everyone else is doing, because what your challenges are and what my challenges are will be different. They present differently. I might be eating something different or have a different history, different conditions, so all of that needs to be tailored to the individual. And we shouldn't be dogmatic in our own space to say, well, one solution is going to fix everything. It may, but you've got to be open-minded enough to experiment. It flags too. I'm sure you've heard it many times. People say, I don't go to the doctor because I don't get sick, or I don't need to go to the doctor. You don't know what you've got and what you don't have. I'm asymptomatic, and here I am. I was knocking on death's door. And cancer is another one. You don't feel it till it gets you. So, would you rather not know? And ignorance is bliss, sure, but if there's an opportunity for you to do something about it, then there's definitely something to take on board and treat it as a little experiment, treat it as a little project. It can be a bit overwhelming, whatever the ailment is, but there's a good chance there's a solution out there if we understand that we've got a vehicle that has this innate ability to self-heal. That's the biggest gift we've got. We can self-heal, so we've just got to stop whatever's causing the need to heal, and it'll hopefully fix itself, if not all the way, definitely part of the way.
It really comes down to understanding what's causing your particular inflammation and trying to address that, right?
Absolutely. The homocysteine and folate example, a bit of research didn't take much digging to understand what are the triggers for poor folate absorption and folic acid. For anyone on folic acid, folic acid, it's a waste of time. If you've got the MTHFR gene mutations, you will not methylate your methylfolate, right? So you need to take a either a very high dose of folate and liver. I've tried a lot of eggs and didn't really make much difference. I haven't tried the liver part, more because of time and yeah. But having a methylfolate supplement that's already broken down, so it's actually better digested and absorbed, has made a difference. So it's being able to understand that. The other part there is, yes, eggs have folate, but they don't have enough when you need to combat some of these other challenges. So we talk about all the nutrients are available in our meat. Absolutely, not questioning that in our food. But is it at the right dose that we need? And if we're not getting the right level of K2, and you can get K2 in aged cheeses, in salamis, Dr. Nathan Bryan does some great interviews with telling you where to find that and the nitric oxide production. But if there's not enough to help the body get to where it needs to be, the cascade of challenges that ensue, and again, I'll encourage people to read Patrick Toit's website for the science. There are so many different functions that it comes into play that you're best off supersaturating your body with K2, and then the body will fix itself. Thyroid and many factors. It's really an interesting piece of the puzzle.
Right. Um, well, it's fantastic to hear that you are reversing the plaque and the issues, and also being able to maintain doing carnivore at the same time.
I
Um,
think, and being able to do it is a bonus, right? Because that's what's part of the solution. Absolutely.
right. And so, what is a regular carnivore menu in the day look like for you? Is it one meal, two meals?
Generally, it's one meal. Depending on what I'm doing during the day, if I'm in the office, um, I'll have um, I'll also have a midday meal just to fill things out. But that would be some kippers or herring, if people know them by herring. A can of them, a can of sardines, and a big chunk of blue cheese mixed together. So why? There's actually a reason for that. That's giving me omega-3 in the order of grams, 3 or 4 grams for the day. It gives me the K2 out of the cheese. It provides a bit of calcium in the natural form um, as a dairy rather than a supplement. I won't take a supplementary calcium. And that calcium, if there is any challenge there with oxalates or whatever from vitamin C, then that's going to help remove that as well. So it'll bind and get rid of it. So for me, that midday, and I'll try to do that 3 to 5 times a week, depending on if I remember or if I decide to stop. That would be if I'm going to have something during the day. But typically, my meal is a nice sized piece of rump, maybe 500 to 750 grams in the evening. Depending on the size of that, will depend on whether I have some eggs with it. And very routine, that's it. Tonight I had some lamb shanks in the slow cooker for the day, and I had two lovely lamb shanks with just salt and some water in there. And it doesn't get boring. I know people say, "Oh, well, that doesn't get boring." Not at all. Happy to eat a steak every day and enjoy it. So I do have cheese. I do have cream. I have coffee. That's my one vice that I do have. Um, but the and obviously all meats are open. I won't have sausages unless I get them specially made or make them myself. Uh, I do have chicken probably once or twice a month, maybe, and pork maybe once or twice a month, but generally it's ruminant. Avoid spices. Not that I don't like spices, but it's that choice about eliminating the triggers. And I think you've probably experienced the same, Dave. Your mindset changes from being the party about the meal, and when you have purpose or when you have an objective, you start to go, okay, I'm doing this and this and this. I enjoy it, but it's not about the enjoyment. It's actually about the outcome. And because it's having an effective outcome, you enjoy it even more.
Yeah, and after this process that you've gone through to get here, and being in the movie theater and having that experience, how are your wife's nerves now?
Pretty good. I mean, she's obviously concerned, but she knows I'm on the right path and supports me 110%. Um, to be honest with you, she's
That's
my rock,
awesome.
always has been. But it's one of those journeys that you go, well, these are some of the challenges that we're dealt. You know, I can't look at someone else and say, hey, someone did this to me. This is where I'm at. This is whether it was some younger days of digression, or whether it's just we in my family, and I didn't bring this up, but so I think Ben Bickman's book Why We Get Sick was written based on my family history, because um, my grandmother passed with two heart attacks at the age of 65. The second one's what got her in the hospital. She was just getting picked up before she had her first one. They got her to hospital. She got ready. They were discharging, and she had the second one in the shower that got her. Grandfather had Alzheimer's and cancer. Um, Uncle had uh, dementia. Another uncle pancreas issues. Another one heart and brain blood clots and so on. Diabetes in the family. All of that. So when I read Ben Bickman's book originally, I thought I could name each person in the family, and it's just the cards you're dealt. Right? We talk about it's genetics. Yes, genetics do have a part to play, but you can't change your genetics. That doesn't mean ignore them, but it means okay, be on the ball with them. Don't tempt fate if you don't need to. And it's definitely about taking control of it and understanding where you're at. Uh, I remember talking to one of the docs about genetic testing, and they said it won't make a difference. You've got what you've got. You've just got to deal with it. But knowing what you're dealing with is helpful. Patrick talks about ApoE4 alleles, and if you've got the ApoE4 combinations, then your LDL takes double the time to get cleared out. It would normally take 2 or 3 days, and it might take 4 to 6 days. So you do need to then think about a different approach than what we do, for example. I haven't tested for that, but that was on the next time I'm doing something, I might add that just to know where we're at. It's a bit checking your LP little a. You're told that won't move. You can't change your LP little a, but maybe you can with the right nutrition, as you touched on before. Is it a surrogate marker of vitamin C or not? So if you take vitamin C, will it help reduce your LP little a? There's this the mechanisms that are there. Not to throw any of the science out that's saying that there is some sort of relationship. I think the challenge is the relationships are being exceedingly stretched to say it's causal, which we know it's not, for LDL at least anyway. So,
Yeah, definitely.
so
Um,
I think that's sort of just, you know, the root cause, the thinking outside the box, open mind, don't panic. That's probably the first thing. Don't panic. It's not going to help. It'll make things worse. Take a breath and watch Patrick's videos, because he takes you on a journey. And that in itself was quite calming to go, okay, here's a person who was told he had 4 years to live, to divorce his wife, buy a Harley, and go down and sit on a beach somewhere. And he said, no, I'm going to sort this out. And he did, right? Um, yeah.
Yeah. So, Mick, look, I really appreciate you doing this. If people want to reach out to you, do you have any way of getting in contact? Any social media, anything like that?
I do. I don't really put much videos and whatever up, but I am in the Facebook group, in your group, and on a few of the other ones. So it's Mick Camilleri. You'll see me floating around. Happy to, if you want to put my email address in um, the notes as well, Dave. If people did want to reach out to me, happy to share where I'm at, what I'm doing with people interested in knowing more. It's not, it shouldn't be kept a secret. It's not to say this is a cure for everyone by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's important that people know that there's a journey ahead of them, and maybe someone to help hold their hand a little bit and steer some of those directions, on what to look for. If we could educate people on how to do root cause, and that was a takeaway for people, then everyone wins, as you were saying before. We need more of that thinking rather than the pharmaceutical said. So that's the answer.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, I'll put those links to your email and so forth in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on, Mick, and sharing your story and your experience. I really appreciate your time.
No, glad to, Dave. As I was saying earlier, I got a bit frustrated watching a Peter Attia interview not long ago, and they were just bagging the carnivore approach and saying you can't fix atherosclerosis. I actually got on and said I did, notwithstanding all the YouTube um, not allowing me to post. I was outright called a liar in one of them, and then told, well, the science hasn't got anywhere beyond regression of maybe 1%, so your 20% is garbage. Well, the test results speak for themselves.